Podcast, play in new window, download, duration, 4704, 21.5 megabytes, subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Android, RSS. Gator Country brings you a new podcast as we recap the Florida Gators baseball season as it came to end in Omaha on Friday. Andrew Spivey and Nick De La Torre break down the season for the Gators, plus look ahead to next year's roster. Andrew and Nick also talk about the latest recruiting news around the program, plus the latest football news. Transcript: Andrew, what's up, Gator Country? Your man, Andrew Spivey, here with Nicholas De La Torre. Nicholas had a long break between the last podcast, a lot of things going on. We apologize for that. Should be getting back on track now with our weekly podcast. Nick, we're just 3 weeks away from SEC Media Days, and this time it's in the great city of Atlanta. Nick, Atlanta is not a great city. Atlanta traffic is some of the worst in the country. They have the most annoying baseball fans, outside of New York, yourself included. I'm reminded every day by those fans that the Braves are still in first place. Andrew, that's right. Shout out to my boy, Barrett Sallee. He and I have a pact that we will be having a good time in the middle of the Battery when our Bravos reach the pinnacle of baseball. It's coming soon. Nick, I'm sorry, how many do they have? How many World Series do the Braves have? Andrew, we just have one. Nick, how many years have they been playing baseball in Atlanta? Andrew, 50-some years, I think. Nick, oh, God. Andrew, it's alright. Nick, even the Marlins have two. Andrew, yeah, but how many times have you guys finished in the well of the cellar? Nick, when the Marlins make the playoffs, they win a World Series. They win a championship. Andrew, so, they've only made the playoffs twice. Nick, that's it? Andrew, there you go. Newsflash, the Atlanta Braves are tied for the best record in the National League. That's all that matters. Nick, what's today's date? It's July. That's cool. Andrew, it's almost July. We'll get into talking some football, some recruiting, here in a few minutes. Nick, we got to talk about the baseball team. Go out to Omaha, and finish a game short, or 2 games short, of making it to the College World Series Finals again. Nick, I'll say this. The beginning of the year the team was really, really good, but when JJ went down it just kind of seemed like someone stuck a needle in them and inflated the air. They just really never regained that momentum. I think what a lot of people don't talk about is the target that's on your back when you're the Florida Gators, the defending national champions. It just kind of caught up to them. Listen, Arkansas is a damn good baseball team. It just caught up to them. Nick, yeah? Listen, Arkansas can hit. Those boys can hit whoever. I think Florida, you hit the nail on the head. It's really when JJ went down the lineup changes drastically, especially the way JJ was hitting. He was hitting .450, .435 in the 10 games before he got hurt. The thing with Florida this year was you really never had a string of everybody hitting cold at one point. So, when JJ wasn't hitting well, India goes on a 20-game hitting streak, and Will Dalton's hitting. Jonathan India started to slow down, Deacon Liput, Austin Langworthy, and JJ Schwartz are hitting. Once JJ went down it was kind of a gut punch to the team, and India wasn't hitting .300, and Liput went down a little bit. It really was only Austin Langworthy that was hitting the ball really well during that time when JJ was down. Then, obviously, losing Brady the last week of the season, last weekend series, and then losing Brady in the SEC tournament, that was a big hit. When it comes down to it, Florida finished 4th. There's 297 baseball teams, and Florida finished 4th. Sully said it. He said, I think the expectations for our team now are to win a national championship. He goes, a lot of teams are just happy to get to Omaha. He said, when I got here, we were just happy to get to Omaha. The first year we were just happy to be here. He said, "The expectations have changed. That's a credit to not just Sully, but to Brad and Craig and the players that have come through to change that expectation. I wouldn't say at all that I think this was a disappointing season. Andrew, I would say it was a disappointing finish, just because it's always a disappointing finish if you don't win a national championship, if you have those expectations to win. I think that would be the better way to say it. It's disappointing that you lose, maybe not disappointing that it was a bad year." Nick, yeah? I could say it was a disappointing finish. They played 70 games this year. I covered, I think, all but 3 of them, when I was out of town for a wedding. My ears were very in tune to this team, and I know what I saw. I think there were a lot of people towards the end of the year that maybe just tuned in at the end. I know you watched most of these games. I think there were a lot of people who maybe didn't know what they were talking about, and that will bring us into our next point. I understand that Brady Singer didn't have good outings against Arkansas. He gave up 8 earned 2 years ago in the SEC tournament, over just 1+ innings of work. He gave up 6 earned. When was it? It was in April maybe, whenever they played in Gainesville this year. Arkansas is really the only team Brady Singer has ever faced that he didn't have success against. Some people were saying, you can't start him on short rest against Arkansas. Look, he doesn't pitch well against Arkansas. When Brady Singer tells me, "Coach, I'm ready to pitch," Brady Singer is going to pitch. That's the National Player of the Year. First-round draft pick. My argument would be, who else would you start? Are you starting Tyler Dyson? He hasn't pitched since May 8th. You can't start Jack Leftwich. You could have started Tommy Mace, but Tommy Mace didn't have a great outing. Defense kind of let him down, but Tommy Mace didn't have a great outing, and he's still a freshman. Do you start him over Brady Singer in an elimination game? My argument is Brady Singer is your guy. That's your bulldog. That's your ace. When your ace says, "I want to pitch, I'm ready to pitch," you throw him. Andrew, yeah? I said this to you, and that is you go with what you got there with. That was with Brady Singer and Jackson Kowar, and those are your 2 guys. You and I are baseball fans, fanatics, whatever you want to call it. We follow the game a lot. If Clayton Kershaw goes to the Dodgers and says, "I want to throw in Game 7 of the World Series," but he's on 3 days rest, you're not taking the ball from Clayton Kershaw. Just like Sully's not taking the ball from Brady Singer. Brady Singer gave Florida the best chance to make it to Saturday. It didn't happen. Who knows what would have happened with anyone else going? It's hindsight, and you know what everyone always says? Hindsight's better. We can't do that. Can't look back. I say this with Singer. Singer's going to pitch on Saturday, most likely on 5 days rest then. That's still not a fully period of rest, because it's 7 days in college baseball. In the postseason, nobody's on regular rest. What difference would it have made for Singer for that extra day of rest? We don't know. Might not have been nothing. Like you said, Arkansas is the only team that hit him well. You can't pull and not go with the guy that got you there. The only thing I will say is I did think Sully had a longer leash for Singer than I thought he would have, but that's for Sully to know. The bullpen didn't do well, outside of Byrne, so what do you go to there? It's Omaha. Nick, that's what he did the day before. You have a 5-run lead, and people are saying, why do you go to Baker? Why didn't you just go straight to Butler? If I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, I'm trying to figure out what I have in the bullpen, because if we're going to win a championship it can't be my starter, Butler, Byrne. It just can't be. Sully said, we can't have Michael Byrne throw in all 5 games. If we're going to make it to the College World Series final, we can't have him throw in 5 straight games. That'd be in 3 straight nights at one point. Andrew, Don Sutton says this best. He's a Hall of Famer. He says, you cannot win one day without looking ahead to the next day. That's exactly what Sully was doing. He was looking ahead. Now, granted, you can't always look ahead, but that is you can't burn everything. Then you win that game, and you go to the next game and have nothing. I understand Sully's point of view as well. Nick, yes. It's also he's trying to see Hunter McCullen, hugely talented. Fastball in the upper 90s, 95, 96, but he had struggled to throw strikes. We got a 5-run lead. Let's put Hunter in. It gives him a chance to throw on this stage. Let's put Tommy Mason. He hasn't had a chance to throw on this stage. You're doing it when you have a comfortable lead. You'd like to, when you have a 5-run lead against Texas Tech, to not have to use Michael Byrne. They ended up having to use him. It lets you know, when you have a comfortable lead, I'm going to get these guys some time. I need somebody to step up. Here's their opportunity. You ran through 4 pitchers before having to throw Michael Byrne. Andrew, exactly. Like I said, you can't win today without looking ahead to tomorrow. You just can't. Can't burn through all of your pieces, especially with a 5-run lead. Listen, the game got a lot closer than I think Sully and the rest of the fans, yourself included, Nick, wanted it to get, but it was a situation where you try to see. Here's the thing too. You see what those guys have, because now you're looking at those games, and you're thinking this is what we need to build on for next year. Baseball is not a game like football or basketball, where you can throw all your eggs in one basket, because in less than 24 hours you got to roll the ball back on the mound again. You can't rest up that quick. Listen, I'll never question Sully with pitching. We can all question and say some things about hitting under Sully, and that's a topic for another day. When it comes to pitching, there's nobody better than Kevin O'Sullivan. If he thinks Brady Singer gave him the best chance to win, I'm trusting Kevin O'Sullivan. Nick, to me, the part that really shocked me was you lost 2 games in Omaha, and they're both credited to Brady Singer. This is a kid that lost 1 game all year, was so good all year. It doesn't all go to him. You didn't hit Texas Tech in the first game. I think there were 3 hits in the first game. I could be wrong. I'm just trying to recall, not looking at the stats. 3 hits, and you're not going to win many games that way. To me, it was a big shock that Brady Singer gets the 2 losses out in Omaha. If you would have told me that when I was getting on my plane to head out there, I would have said you're crazy. The reason Florida's pitching is so good is because of how Kevin O'Sullivan handles his guys and how he handles his staff. He takes care of players. That's why the top prospects in the country, these top high school kids, keep coming back to Florida, coming to Florida. It's because I know I'm going to be protected and developed and taken care of while I'm there for my 3 years. Andrew, you look back at the last few years. Dane Dunning. You have Alex Faedo. You had 2 guys this year. I'm sure I'm missing someone. You just look at the last 3 years. AJ Puck, Logan Shore. How could I miss those 2 guys? You go back, and you look at the guys that are there, and all those guys are on the brink of making it to the major leagues. Those are all Sully guys. Those are guys that don't have arm problems, with the exception of AJ Puck, and they're that way for a reason. You look at some teams around the country, 130, 140 pitches, and then in 5 days they're throwing again, 130, 140 pitches. Those are the guys that aren't getting top pitchers to commit to them in the first place, and then give up multi-million-dollar contracts to come to school. You look at the guys Sully's got, and it's not fully on Sully, but you look at some of the guys that have gave up some decent amount of money to come back to school. Jackson Kowar being one, Brady Singer being another. Nick, yeah, Kowar is a great story, because he grew up a Clemson fan, was committed to Clemson. They fired Jack Leggett. That's how in tune Sully and Brad and Craig are. Jack Leggett gets fired after the year. That year Sully is getting ready to go to Omaha, and all of a sudden, a call comes out. Jackson, want to come to Gainesville? Sure. You get 3 years of Jackson Kowar, because Sully is able to multitask, I guess you could say, and we're going to the College World Series, but I also am looking towards next year and the year after, and all that. Andrew, Nick, give us a quick rundown. We won't spend too much time of this. Just guys that are expected to leave this team, and then I know there's 1 or 2 commits that are expected to leave as well, or signees now. Give us a quick rundown of who is not expected to be back next year. Nick, leaving 100% is Jonathan India, Deacon Liput, J.J. Schwartz, Nick Horvath. They're seniors. Jackson Kowar, Brady Singer. All those guys are gone. Michael Byrne, I know as of Saturday Kevin O'Sullivan was calling the Burns and asking them frantically, do I need to offer somebody else? There's another scholarship. What are you guys doing? There just hadn't been much conversation between the Burns and the Reds in Cincinnati. Byrne was all in on Omaha, and once that ended they were going to start talking. I know that Michael Byrne and his family will have a number that they want to hit. If the Reds hit that number, he'll be a professional baseball player. You and I were talking a little bit off the air, and I don't know how much more he has to prove. Yes, he can come back as a starter, and prove that he can be a starter, but he pitched in the Cape last year and was a starter in the Cape. So, teams see that. Teams look at summer ball. I don't know how much he has to prove, and you lose your negotiating power when you're a senior versus when you're a junior. That negotiating power being I can go back to school. Here's my number. Get close to that, above it, or reach it, or else I'm going back to school, and you wasted a draft pick. Andrew, hold on a second. I want to say this too. Michael Byrne is not a closer in the big leagues. He's a starter. Nick, yes. Andrew, just throw that out there. I know some people thought he might be a closer. No, he's not a closer in the big leagues. Nick, no, he is not. He is a starter or a bullpen guy. That's what he is. He is not a back end of the bullpen guy. Andrew, right. Go ahead. Nick, coming back you'll have Brady McConnell. That will be your shortstop. He missed all of the year really with that hand injury. He was ready to go. He was healthy towards the end of the year. I know Blake Reese struggled, but you get an older guy like Reese, who's a junior. He'll be back as well. You got to figure, am I going to mess with the chemistry? I'm not taking Jonathan India out of the lineup. I'm not taking Deacon Liput out of the lineup. So, I got to take Blake Reese. Am I going to mess with the chemistry? Blake struggled defensively too at second base but came up with some big hits. Had a couple big hits in Omaha and a couple big hits in the regional, super regional. I think that's the decision O'Sullivan made, that he's not being the best, he's not playing his best ball at the end, but are we going to mess with the team chemistry towards the end there? At catcher, you're going to get all 3 of these guys back, Greenfield, Smith, and Durant. To fill out the rest of the infield, I already said McConnell and Reese. Keon Bell will be back. Need to see him hit better. Played great defensively, but need to see him really turn the corner at the plate. Then Shane Shiflett is a kid they're really high on. He's a guy that can play any 3 positions, shortstop, second base, or third base. That's something to look at. Also, Brady Smith, not just catching, but he's a guy that they'll be looking forward or looking to play a corner and field spot if they need him to. I need to pull this guy up from Chipola. There is a catcher from Chipola College that they're looking at getting, a JUCO kid. Threw a .420, I think, last year. I'll get his name eventually. Outfield, Will Dalton. Nelson Maldonado did not get drafted, so he'll be back for his senior year. Austin Langworthy. Those will be your 3 outfield guys. Will Dalton will be probably in center field. Really, the biggest spots are pitching. You're going to get Leftwich and Mace back. Those are your Friday, Saturday guys. Tyler Dyson will be a guy that is trying to hang on to a weekend spot. Garrett Milton, a name from 2 years ago, he had Tommy John surgery, so he'll be back for his redshirt sophomore year. Then I'll just run through these real quick because you've got like 12 pitchers. Connor Churchill. Colton Gordon is a guy who redshirted this year. We'll see if he's back or not. He traveled to Omaha, but wasn't dressing in the postseason, but traveled with the team. Hunter McCullen. Hunter Ruth is a guy from Gainesville, Florida. He's coming back from Tommy John, but he's a mid-high 90s guy, great arm. Nick Long didn't pitch too much this year. He'll be back for his junior year. Andrew Baker, Cole May, and Kirby McCullen. A lot of arms that O'Sullivan will return. Then a name that I'm going to be keeping close on is Mason Denneberg. He's from Merritt Island, same high school as Brady McConnell. He's a mid-90s guy. Devastating breaking ball. Was a first-round draft pick of the Nationals. Nationals have a very small signing pool. He's a name I'm going to be keeping an eye on July 15th. I'll have a story after the July 15th signing period, because everyone keeps asking me about the recruiting class. I think a lot of people just don't understand how different baseball recruiting is than football recruiting. I can give you a big list of guys right now, and it'll be completely different on July 16th, after the signing period. Andrew, yeah? It's one of those things where the bonus pool comes into effect. If they have an extra amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars, they can give a fifth-round pick a little bit more than they should and all that stuff because they got leverage. Tune into that. Wanted to hit a quick note real quick, and that is Tim Walton. Softball got that big extension. He was a hot commodity. Texas was knocking at the door, calling him. There were some teams calling Walton, wanting Tim Walton to leave the Gators. Credit to Scott Strickland for knowing what he has in Tim Walton. That's another team, they get out to Oklahoma City. They don't finish where they wanted to, but to get to Oklahoma City again is pretty good. Nick, yeah? There was some questionable calls. I don't want to feed everyone or reopen that wound, but some questionable calls out in Oklahoma, and I don't understand. If you're going to slow down the game by introducing instant replay, then make it extensive. Be able to make the right call on everything, not just we blew that one, but that's not one of the plays that we can go back and watch. Andrew, when ESPN is calling the umpires out, you know it's pretty obvious. Nick, yeah? They don't do that often, because they pay a lot of money to be there, to be the sole provider, or the sole broadcaster, for those things. They don't often disagree with things or make waves, but they were there. Andrew, it was bad. It was really bad. Nick, let's go on. Let's talk a little football recruiting. Lot of things have went on. Fans are ready to fire Don Mullen, if you hadn't got that message yet, Nick. Nick, he fired yet. Andrew, he's getting close. They got the pitchforks out. Now, they did pick up a commit since the last time we came on, and that was offensive lineman Riley Simmons, out of Beaufort, Georgia. Big offensive lineman, 6 feet 3 inches, 324. Guard, tackle kind of guy. Comes from a very prestigious program in Beaufort, produces a lot of linemen. He's going to be very technique, fundamentally sound. He's going to be a guy that's going to come in and work hard and play the game the right way, play the game the way John Hevesy likes. So, again, a good pickup now. Everyone's going to look at the stars and say, he's only a 3-star. Nick, Mullen's taking 3 stars. Andrew, yeah? There you go. Nick, get rid of him. What is this, Mississippi State? Andrew, there you go. Again, a good pickup, a solid pickup. Florida now sits with 10 commits in the class. I think they're in the high 20s in the country in recruiting rankings and all that good stuff. Now, move on to the guys that are starting to turn away. Looks like DB Chris Steele out of California, likely USC. Micah Pittman, the wide receiver, looks to be leaning towards Oregon, but Florida is still in the mix there. He hasn't announced yet. The good news is tight end Ethan Ray says he wants to make a mid-summer decision. Looks like Florida is going to be in that one. While I get the unsettling feeling of some of the guys, big-name guys, are starting to go elsewhere. A guy like Nathan Pickering, Nick, you and I talked about him. He was a guy that came on campus, had a lot of high praise, and then he stays in the state of Mississippi and commits to Mississippi State. I understand people starting to worry that these big names that are on the board, the high-priced targets, are committing elsewhere. I also will say this. The brand of Florida is still the brand of Florida. There hasn't been a game to show that things are back yet. That leads me to my next point. Someone brought this on our message board, and you and I said it was a really good point. Did Don Mullen underestimate how damaged the brand was when he got to Florida? Right off the top of my head, I would say probably so. Do you agree with that, Nick? Nick, yeah, Dan Mullen was here for the 4 most successful years of Florida football. That's what he knows. Obviously, from afar he is looking, and he can see that Florida went 4-7, they're going through coaches real quickly. He can see that, but you don't really know until you're in it. I think he shows up, and the Florida brand, that Florida logo, does mean something, but it's like when people were complaining about the football team and saying, this is Florida, this shouldn't be happening. I say, it's not the Florida that you're saying it is. The brand had been damaged by going 4-7, by going 4-8. It's not the Florida that was winning 10 games a year, and people were complaining about winning only 10 games. That's not the same Florida that Dan Mullen is at. It's why he's here. If Florida was what Dan Mullen was when he left, then he wouldn't be here. We'd still have whoever that coach was. I would say that's a fair thing to say, that he probably underestimated the damage that had been done to the program. Andrew, yeah? I mean, I will say this. Someone had a good point. They said, what is it? Is it the relationships in state? It probably is. Him and his staff don't have a ton of guys that have a lot of connections in state. They recruited it but don't have a ton of connections in state, and maybe that's an issue. I will say that when you recruit the state of California as heavily as they're recruiting the state of California, you're going to swing and miss more times than you are successful. Tongue-in-cheek, I go back to the University of Florida, and if you want to get back to where you want the University of Florida, which is the Urban Meyer days, the good Steve Spurrier days, you have to recruit the best of the best, whether that's in Hawaii, whether that's in California, whether that's in Nebraska, Oregon, wherever it may be. When you're the University of Florida, and you're at the upper echelon, the top pinnacle of the national focus, you have to recruit the best. Now, that might go back to what we just talked about, in that Dan thought he could go out to California and recruit those guys, because it was the old Florida. Well, it's not the old Florida, not yet at least. Do I believe Mullen can get Florida back? Yes, I do. I do believe in what Mullen brings to table. Nick, I think you do agree that Mullen is different than the past too. But when you go out to California, and when you go to these states that are very close to national powerhouses, you're going to swing and miss more than you hit a single. Nick, I do like that. We talked about in the past where the coach